This looks like something that should be hanging upside down inside the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon. And perhaps that's what gives it so much credibility, because it looks like a powerful piece of equipment, and it is. This is the ColecoVision. And look, it even has vents. For what specifically, I'm not sure, but they're like the vents on the side of a Ferrari. You don't care what they're there for, they just look cool. And it's awesome. The games on the ColecoVision are far superior to those for the competing Atari 2600. And actually, the ColecoVision's primary competitor was the Atari 5200, which is like the one Atari I don't have yet. So we'll have to do a comparison between this and the 5200 at a later date. It's a clunky looking game system, but this thing is solid, it feels industrial, it feels like you're driving an AT-AT every time you're playing ColecoVision, and that's a feeling you want to have. Shooting people running away from you. Anyway, let's take a look at how this works. You put a game cartridge into the slot that says insert cartridge here. Nice snug fit. One thing I like about the ColecoVision is if you're looking at the front of the game console, you can read what game is inserted into the ColecoVision. The Atari is backwards. Atari games face the other direction. In fact, I'll show you. Because I always have an Atari nearby. Who doesn't? Let's find an Atari game. Oh, look, there's one. Q*bert for the Atari 2600. And let's put that in. See that? The game faces away from you, so you don't know what you're playing unless you look above it or on the other side. It's one thing I like about the ColecoVision. In fact, for consistency, we'll take the ColecoVision version of Q*bert, put that in there. Which would you rather play? Well, I'd rather play the ColecoVision version anyway, but that's another issue. Alright, so once you have a game cartridge inserted into the ColecoVision, remove your Atari 2600 that's sitting on top, because although I don't know what those vents do, they might do something. And then there's a big switch over here. You turn on or off. On and off. Sadly, there's no light on the front of the ColecoVision that lets you know when the game console is on. That's one minor complaint I have with it. And there's a reset button. You start the games using the keypads on the controllers. One thing the Atari 2600 does not have. Although it looks like something that was built by the Empire, I like the fact that the controllers are nestled within the ColecoVision. You see that? They plug in there. It's kind of awkward, and at first you're like, what the heck is this? But then you get used to it and realize that this makes storing the ColecoVision very simple because you don't have controller wires all over the place. There's an expansion port here, which I have previously reviewed, the expansion module number 1, which allows you to play Atari 2600 games. You get a top-down look here at the insert cartridge here, the on and off switch. Although the ColecoVision may be ugly, it has a great personality. And isn't that what's really important? That and a huge stack of awesome games. The ColecoVision had a relatively short lifespan and was a victim of poor timing. The Nintendo came out a few years later and the industry never really looked back, so these ColecoVisions aren't as common as, say, Atari 2600s or Nintendo Entertainment Systems. However, there's still a lot of them out there. They're relatively affordable today and easy to collect. There's a lot of terrific games for the ColecoVision, and here at Classic Game Room I review a number of those. ColecoVision games have terrific graphics and gameplay, and you can see that in the reviews. Games like Gorf and Frogger, these arcade classics, are just brought over to the ColecoVision with perfection. And that puts them light years ahead of many of the Atari 2600 competing games. However, word of caution, if you're collecting them, many of the ColecoVision games look identical to Atari cartridges. One of these is Atari, one is ColecoVision. Can you tell which is which? Not until I turn them over. This one is the ColecoVision game. There's a reason for that space on the back of the cartridge. You can see that here. Looks like they put their little inserts in there that would fit over the controller. Let's take a look at that. Here's the ColecoVision controller. Many of the games used the buttons. Take a little insert, slide it in there. Check that out. They put a number 5 on the dog's nose. Let's take a look at the back of this thing. It's a pretty hefty piece of equipment. And this is where the audio and the video come out on a single coax cable. Hooks up to a television in a similar way to an Atari 2600. I use a VCR to bring the signal into a modern HD TV. And this is where the power adapter goes. And that brings me to my next discussion. What is better, the ColecoVision, the Atari 2600, or the Nintendo Entertainment System?